Hello, my name is Olorotimi Osha. Today, I want to discuss my experience as an auditor in the Department of the Navy. Um, I've been doing these videos because I was swatted on May 16, 2023. Now, the swatting was a false flag operation, right? Ostensibly, they used Jide Iwarere. Jide Iwarere is supposed to have instigated all of this through an emergency evaluation petition. But Jide Iwarere apparently was my emergency contact at the Navy, right? And he was incidentally given this unauthorized termination letter, right? But it turned out that to be an unauthorized termination letter written by Nathan R. Brown, who was a white guy. He was my temporary supervisor, and everything he wrote was fabricated. It was unauthorized, apparently, by the Auditor General of the Navy, whom I had actually been secretly reporting to, telling stuff. She was my mentor, right? She was actually my mentor. And the GD where it did this false flag operation, I've done videos explaining about that, and that was supposed to be why the Navy raided me, and it wasn't the Navy. Montgomery County Police raided me, and I couldn't see who else was outside. My neighbors, one of my neighbors, did and recorded it and said, "Look, the military came in military gear. He saw them, everything. Who was in my corridor, and the uh, from the body cam that they've revealed to me, it's been over 3 years. It was Montgomery County Police, right? But again, I'm not a criminal, and I wasn't going through a mental health crisis, any medical crisis, because I don't have a mental illness. I was never suicidal. I was never homicidal, right? Well, Jide Wari fabricated this, and he had no authority, right? My family and has already indicated that Jide Wari is not my uncle, and he has no authority to do what he did. Uh, so they gave Jide this termination letter, right? And that was what he was coming to bring to me, right? So it's bizarre. I was working in a classified area, in a top secret, right, classified area, but Jide, who doesn't work for the government, was supposed to be bringing this termination letter to me, and that was what eventually led to him attempting to kidnap me, and then the police coming to raid me. You see how it's all bizarre, right? So that's part of a false flag operation. But in any event, the person that was behind it is a woman called Nefertari McBride. She was Assistant Auditor General of the Navy, and so I'm going to explain how I got into that position. So it all starts with after I'd gotten to know Donjet Gilmore. This was end of January, 2022. I had been a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. I'd been at the number one pick, and I'd filed a complaint. So this was ongoing. In the process, I came to meet Donjet L. Gilmore. She was the auditor. She subsequently became the Auditor General of the Navy in June 2022. Right. She was a senior member of the Senior Executive Service, and she had been acting Auditor General of the Navy before. So I interviewed for a position with the Auditor General as an auditor, right? As an auditor in the Naval Audit Service in the Department of the Navy. I had another job. I was already working. I was working. I was working in a credit union. I'm not going to say where, and I was supporting the CEO of the credit union, who was trying to get me, so saying, look, you could be CEO of a credit union. You could, why do you want to work for the government? So I was now supposed to be going through another clearance process, right? So in any event, the Auditor General of the Navy meets me. She starts coaching me. She fixes my resume. So it's like, I'm like, this is after law school. I graduated from law school in 2019. I completed another program at Columbia University, which I had left behind. 2020, we were stuck in COVID. I had started my digital magazine. My digital magazine, I never asked for funding from anywhere. It was out of pocket, self-funding, no problems with the government or anything like that. So self-supporting. And of course, I had a business in Nigeria, which the DoD asked me to remove myself from, to dissolve because of the sensitive nature of my job. But in any event, I hadn't been to Nigeria, of course, since I came, since 1999. And my job, my goal was to go home and see my mother, see my family, right? So I wanted to go home. But I now got this new offer, right, with the Department of the Navy. And they were going back and forth over this thing, over stuff, right? Credentialing, and I realized that it appeared. I don't want to conflate issues. It's the government, so there's a lot of secret stuff. By the way, nothing that I'm saying is classified information, but there's a lot of secret stuff going on, especially since I'd rightfully filed an EEOC complaint regarding my McCain Fellowship against Kirsten Risbeck and some people in the Department of Defense for acts of moral turpitude, and that was ongoing, right? So, but here was the Auditor General of the Navy, who was now going to help me. She was not yet Auditor General of the Navy, but she was a member of the Senior Executive Service. She'd been in the federal government for 40 years. That's all she had done, and now she was acting like my mentor, right? She fixed my resume. She tried to encourage me to stay on in government because my thing was like I'd already accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, right? And it was the U.S. government that came to pursue me to join. But so I kind of wanted to go home, and I'm not a do or die person, right? And I'm not desperate, right? Nigeria is there for me. I'll be fine, right? My dad never lived in America, and he became a bank chairman, bank CEO. He did great, right? In Nigeria, right? My dad had been a millionaire. He was late now. He did well. I have many relatives, many people who've done well. I have friends who are bank CEOs, who are generals. They're doing well in Nigeria, right? I'm an American citizen, no big deal. So I wanted to go home, right? But here was the Auditor General. She sort of now convinced me, right? She convinced me that, okay, you know what? Don't worry, don't see things in a cynical manner, right? That, hey, these guys are dishonest or whatever, no big deal. So this person, somebody from the Navy HR, contacts me about an auditor's position. She initially said it's a GS11. Then eventually she says, okay, you know what? It's actually that I'm actually qualified for the GS12. So she wanted to verify my credentials. That's a process. She wanted to verify my credentials, my qualifications, my transcripts, all of that, right? So they did all of that, and she would call me, even though I was working, because I had a job, right? I had a job that I was already doing, but she would call me regarding this, accepting a certain level. Then her boss, that's Kendra Tees. That's how she gets into the picture. She's Director of Human Services, Resources, or whatever in the Department of the Navy. She called me and had an hour conversation. Actually, it was like 47, 48 minutes. And I couldn't believe it. I was trying to convince me, coerce me, persuade me that, okay, you know what? I should take a lower GS9. Because, the other lady, the black woman, had said, no, she's calling for GS11. This is what you're minimally qualified for. That in fact, I'm qualified for GS12. So they're going on and on. Kendra T's in the conversation says, you know what, you're actually qualified for GS14. And then she goes and she uses she baits me. She uses the lure. She goes, oh, that you can actually become a senior executive, a member of the Senior Executive Service here in the Department of the Navy. And, she's going on these long conversations. And I don't want to be rude because I'm thinking, okay, so these guys are acting like they want me desperately, right? They want me desperately. Okay, no problem. So eventually, in any event, I eventually accept something there. They send me a GS11, right? So you're going through the pre-employment screening, which you're answering questions, you're doing all of that. So they make you offers in the government, in the federal government, several times, because after you pass, then you're going to go through another background check, soft screening. You're going to go through another background check, all of that. So I went through all of that, accepted a GS11, Then after all of that was done, they now switched it that okay, that was an error. They said GS9. Meanwhile, I'm still ongoing with my EU protected case regarding the McCain Fellowship because that's my right. You know, that was because the McCain Fellowship I earned it right. It was a senior leadership track to be in the DoD, and the person who had done some kind of bizarre termination, said she didn't know who terminated me. She wrote, Olurotimi Osha had no performance or misconduct issues. I worked hard, and I reported somebody. When you report, you're not supposed to for misconduct. They're not supposed to retaliate. But in the Department of Defense, that's the MO. That's a standard operation. But, that when you report a senior for misconduct, they terminate you. They retaliate against whistleblower a law. But in any event, I'm talking about the Navy now, right? So I'm in the Navy. I'm going on. There's the ongoing thing that I'm filing. I've paid an attorney. I had an attorney. So my salary, I was using my salary to basically pay the private attorney, a national firm, right, to pursue my EO complaints against the Department of Defense, right, for, misconduct, a number of things. I don't have to go into the details, right? That's my constitutional rights, First Amendment right to petition the government, right? So, by the way, guess who had me do this? Because I wanted to withdraw it at some point. It was the Auditor General of the Navy. She asked me go and get a lawyer. That's Don Jedel Gilmer. She was the one who told me go and get a lawyer. So she talked to me every day, and she talked to me about discrimination. She talked to me everything about in the government. So she, took on a position that she was grooming me. Teaching me, letting me know, the discrimination against black people in the Department of Defense, all of that, giving me all that history. So I was doing all of that. So at some point, while working as an auditor, I started to experience hostile behavior and harassment from a female. So I was working in a team. I was the only black male, and there were four black women. I was the only male person in this team, and they would make all sorts of derogatory remarks. But no big deal. I'm a big guy, big boy. But one person in particular started harassing me, and she was a black woman, right? So I was the newest person. Ironically, even though I was the newest person, I had the most degrees, the most prestigious degrees, the most experience qualifications. These people had actually been in the federal government for a long time, right? 18, 15, 16, that kind of stuff. The person, that had been there the least maybe 7 years. So the entire career was in the federal government, right? So I was new in the federal government. But this one person I was experiencing harassment from, of course, I used to tell the Auditor General. The Auditor General then told me that, look, if they're harassing you, there are other directorates, because she was the Auditor General of the Navy. She said, there are other directorates, go somewhere else. They want you, other places want you, right? So one day she actually first told me to report to HR, that they're not supposed to be doing that. I should report to HR, their EO. So I reported to HR and EEO, and Nefertari McBride then emailed me and said, okay, that we should have a meeting. So November 4th, 2022, we had a meeting. I told her I wanted to leave, that, because this person had created such a hostile environment for me, and, I'm not comfortable, that I want to leave. The Auditor General told me that, look, there are other directorates. She had gotten, I don't know, okay, so she presented something to me to be an attorney I hadn't taken the bar, but, and the reason I canceled taking the bar was because of my clearance, to get my clearance and to get situated, because I thought, okay, I'll take it later on, because everybody said, look, this top secret thing is a big deal. It's SSCI, it's a big deal, and which I found out that it was. But, anyway, so that's the reason I canceled taking the bar, right? So, I was working there. I had my TSSCI, so I wanted to leave, I was presented an opportunity to work as an attorney without having the bar, right? In the Office of General Counsel. I think the title they'll call you is law clerk, but I was given an opportunity to do that. And by the way, I'd met somebody in acquisitions. He was a white guy who used to talk to me, made himself like an informal mentor, and he wanted me to get there. But he gave me a requirement, said I have to take the bar first. This is the level I'll be on, So I thought about that. But now so I thought, okay, let me just remain in Naval Audit Service, right? And since the head of the agency I worked for was my mentor, I was safer there, right? It was better for me. But she used to tell me every day that those people were trying to get me fired because once I went to report this person, I went to report the person who was harassing me to EEO, to HR, because the Auditor General asked me to do that. She said, look, because I just used to tell I would take it and I'll be telling the Auditor General. And she said, so eventually she said, look, they're harassing you. There's another place that wants me, just ask HR, it's your right to switch you to this directorate. There's this directorate, ask to switch. So I requested, but this Assistant Auditor General now emailed me and called a meeting November 4th, 2023. She said she wanted to resolve it. So she talked, she lied. I found out, that she said all sorts of stuff. That's Nefertari McBride. She said, she sees me as an asset. She doesn't want to leave me. She gave me a number of options, that, okay, hey, what if she moves me to another team? She said she doesn't want to lose me from her directorate, that she really valued me. That's why she hired me, all that stuff. Okay. So she pretends. So I accept it. I say, okay, I run it by the Auditor General. And there was a guy she said I'll be working with, right? I had a good rapport with him. It was this white guy who'd been in the Marines for a long time, and he'd been in the government for over 20 years, a long time, over 20 years. He was even getting ready to retire. He was older than me. And when I met him, immediately, I sat next to him. He immediately gave me a nice, big brother talk, everything. So good rapport. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't mind working with this guy, right? So that was cool. So I ran it by the Auditor General of the Navy. She just said it was okay. So I didn't go to the directorate she asked me to, right? So, and, but it turned out that Nefertari McBride, all that she did was a lie. So when she ran this by me, she was now sending negative stuff to me about the Auditor General. She started lying every day. I have the text. I got to see the text, the emails she was sending to the Auditor General. Just lying against me every day. The woman who said, that the person who actually said no, that she was she saw me as an asset and she wanted me to stay. So all of those things are violations in the government. Now, they were also doing a special access program clearance on me. She said they should do a special access clearance program on me. She asked for my certificate of naturalization. She asked for all these things. Now, you see the special access program clearance, right? You see, it's come up in the news with respect to the CIA Senior Executive Service con artist David Rush, right? Because he was running a special access program, a fake program. So nobody gets to see what's in it. I now suspect and I now see that this thing they were saying, a special access program, right? That's what they were now instigating to use to swat me, right? So the Auditor General also warned me about Nefertari McBride, saying Nefertari McBride does this counseling or something, mental, psychological counseling, mental health, and she sees herself as some kind of expert. She told me to beware of it. At some point, the Auditor General also started warning me that she started warning me that I should quit. I should have quit. That she doesn't want them to humiliate me. She doesn't want them to arrest me. I'm not going to do anything that's going to have me arrested. By the way, most of the time I was working remotely, right? So I wasn't interacting. I've never been arrested. I'm not going to do anything that's going to cause me to be arrested. But she understood the MO of the Navy and the invidious, perfidious character of Nefertari McBride. Nefertari McBride committed serious crimes, right? Apart from, not just constitutional rights violations, deprivation of rights, but she obstructed justice. So I continued my EEO complaint against this person, right? So she instigated the swatting, right? And she was, of course, she was also committing perjury, right? All of these are serious crimes. The video is 20 minutes. I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to continue with the moral turpitude and the perfidious conduct of Nefertari McBride that almost got me killed, and constitutional violations and violations against my constitutional rights. My name is Olurotimi Osha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.